On June 27, 1844, a mob murdered Joseph Smith and his brother Hiram. While he had accomplished an incredible amount in his life, Joseph left a great deal unfinished at his death.
Joseph was not just the leader of the church, he was the leader of a community. He was a husband and father. It's uncertain how exactly they're going to move forward after this devastating loss.
It was a really difficult time. Not only was Emma mourning the death of her husband, who was only 38 when he died, but she was pregnant and she had young children to care for, and her finances were precarious.
The other concern that's tied up in all of this, beyond just the temporal affairs, is that in the last few years of his life, Joseph had been urgently trying to reveal and to implement ordinances, doctrines, in preparation for the time when the temple would be completed, so that there would be this core of people who had the ordinances and could pass them on. But at the time that he dies, it's still just this small group of people that have that knowledge.
Joseph Smith was the first and only prophet that they knew. So with his death, many Latter-day Saints were wondering who and what next? What's going to happen?
But at the time of Joseph's death, only a few church leaders were in Nauvoo. Most were scattered around the country.
The saints are looking for leadership. They're frightened. They're being threatened. Willard Richards, who's one of only 2 apostles left in Nauvoo at this time, is urging the saints to stay calm and to remain peaceful. But it looks like they're going to be subject to more violence.
When word that Joseph Smith had been killed reached the apostles, they were stunned. Brigham Young said he felt as though his head would crack.
Before Joseph Smith's death, I think many of the 12 wouldn't have assumed that they would be leading the church. I think a lot of them just felt that Joseph Smith would be the prophet until the second coming.
The scattered leaders were left to respond to the challenges the saints faced. After hearing about the martyrdom, Sidney Rigdon, the surviving counselor in the First Presidency, suggested that the leaders meet with him in Pittsburgh to hold a council. In a letter, Brigham Young replied that the apostles would return as quickly as possible to Nauvoo instead.
After we have rested and mourned for our martyred brethren, we will sit down together and hold a council on the very ground where sleeps the ashes of our deceased friends. Brigham Young.
But in the weeks of waiting, Emma expressed concern about her family's financial situation. She pressed to have Stake President William Marks appointed as a trustee in trust to manage church finances.
Emma needed to feel secure. She needed a sense of financial stability. And so she wanted action immediately, someone appointed as trustee in trust so that she could be taken care of. Members of the 12 that were there in Nauvoo resisted this. They wanted to wait until the entire quorum was present.
When Sidney Rigdon arrived in Nauvoo, he presented a different plan. He argued that Joseph Smith could not be replaced, and that as Joseph's counselor, he should be the church's guardian. Parley P. Pratt, one of the few apostles that had already returned, was tending to his garden when he heard Rigdon was holding a public meeting to present his claims.
Parley, on receiving this information, dropped his hoe, came to the meeting, and walked on the stand barefoot, his pants rolled up above his ankles and his shirt sleeves halfway to his elbows, and soon put a stop to the plan. Lewis Barney.
There were a lot of reasons that Pratt felt that they needed to wait until the 12 could return to Nauvoo. Over the course of the previous years, the 12 had taken their place as a governing quorum in the church. This was provided for in Revelation as far back as 1835 in what we now have as Section 107 of the Doctrine and Covenants, but it took time for the 12 to grow into this role and for Joseph to entrust them with the keys and the ordinances that they would then be responsible to implement after he was gone. Parley knew that the future of the church was at stake here and that it rested on those ordinances and revelations that Joseph had entrusted to them.
Despite Pratt's protests, Sidney Rigdon remained determined to resolve the issue quickly. As a compromise, William Marks set a date for a meeting in 4 days to consider Rigdon's claims. A group of 5 apostles, including Brigham Young, were still on their way back. The next day, they shared their thoughts about the future as they rode toward Nauvoo.
Elder Kimball said he had a dream last evening. In the dream, he was preaching to a large congregation and said the prophet Joseph had laid the foundation for a great work, and it was now for us to build on it. Wilford Woodruff.
The members of the 12 were very eager, willing to move Joseph Smith's vision forward. When he was living, they were his strongest supporters. When he died, they didn't have the leader anymore, but they still had that vision.
The group arrived back in Nauvoo 2 days before Sidney Rigdon's planned meeting. On August 8th, Brigham Young went to the meeting, organized the congregation as a solemn assembly, and called on the people to choose their course.
What do the people want? Although my heart is full of mourning, I feel compelled this day to step forth in the discharge of those duties God has placed upon me. If the people want President Rigdon to lead them, they may have him. But I say unto you that the quorum of the 12 have the keys of the kingdom of God. Brigham Young.
Most of the listening saints received a powerful spiritual witness that God's power was with the 12 and voted to sustain them. In the coming months, several of them wrote about their experience as Brigham Young spoke.
It was evident to the saints that the mantle of Joseph had fallen upon him. Wilford Woodruff.
If a man had been blinded, he would hardly have known if it were not Joseph. Howard Egan.
Not everything was resolved on August 8, 1844. While a majority of the saints followed Brigham Young and went west, many followed other break-off movements. Emma decided to remain in Nauvoo. She wanted to protect her family and the possessions and home that she did have. But most of the saints did follow the 12 apostles and Brigham Young west, where they laid the foundation of the church as we know it today.
In the short term, the decision to follow the 12 stabilized the church, gave it clear leadership, clear purpose. The saints came to discover that on the long term, this was of dispensational importance. Sidney Rigdon had argued that the key was to be close to Joseph and to follow Joseph. What they came to learn was that the purpose was to follow Christ, and that the proper authority would allow a variety of men and women to represent him.